customer that wanted a full bulletproof exterior.
Wow.
So that would mean reconfiguring all of the body panels.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Supply Chain Conversations podcast. I'm Annabella.
I'm Mo.
And I'm Chris.
In this podcast, you'll find conversations about anything related to the supply chain.
And how we make sense of the business world.
And we'll explore what innovation looks like in practice.
So welcome on board and enjoy the conversation. In this episode, we're talking to Ben, and he's telling us about his experience in the automotive industry. So he's comparing between his experience at Bentley and now at Aston Martin. And it was really interesting to see how he applied the things he has learned in such a natural way, comparing both companies in terms of their value proposition and how they deal with their supply chains, how they innovate. So it's really exciting conversation. So we really hope you enjoy it. Right, let's do this. Well, welcome to the podcast, Ben. It's really nice to catch up with you and learn a bit more about what you've been up to. I wanted to start just by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are now, so that whoever is listening to our podcast gets to know a little bit about you.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So my name is Ben Roberts. I graduated from UWE off the business and management degree back in 2023 after spending 3 years at the university, but 4 years on my degree program in total, because I did a sandwich year. After 2 years, went and worked for Bentley Motors, came back and finished off, and as I said, graduated in 2023. I've then spent a year or so traveling. I went and did quite a big stint. I went to places such as Colombia, the Philippines, Indonesia. So really nice, diverse places. And then sort of came back with my head screwed a little bit on and decided to apply for some jobs. I wanted to stick in the automotive industry, I think. I think Bentley sort of cemented that passion and that interest in that industry particularly. So applied solely for jobs within that industry, and managed to secure the one at Aston Martin, which realistically was a dream, really, to be honest. It was probably up there as one of the top companies, with it, you know, being British and on home turf, as well as just being sort of up at the pinnacle of automotive. So I'm there now. I'm on a graduate program within the commercial remit, and I've spent the last 14 months sort of doing rotations within that commercial function. Things such as sales and network performance. So looking into the performance and incentive programs behind how our dealer network run and operate, and improving that. And then more recently, I've gone into the regional team within the UK, in the marketing department. So I've spent the last 6 months there, and now just in a bit of a limbo period before Christmas in a supporting role back in my home department, before I start something new in the new year.
Oh wow, you've been busy.
Yes, you could say that. Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you about your trip, but that sounds fantastic.
Sure.
What a gap year, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
they will ask about it in a minute.
I'm jealous.
For sure. We're very jealous with all the sunshine and stuff, and the food. Anyway, but I am curious, because you said, it kind of cemented your initial work at Bentley, cemented your interest in the automotive industry. So can you tell us a bit more about that? So why the automotive industry? Why is it so interesting about it? What is really, you know, what made it, this is really something I want to stay in? Yeah,
I think I've always had quite a strong interest in cars in general, and then just looking at more the luxury sector as well is just really impressed me, in terms of just an interest for the end product ultimately. And I think you sometimes lose touch within those roles within the business, but I've been fortunate enough to be within roles that have had sort of major impacts on how those end products end up in the market, and hands-on experience with them. And I think that just evolves into that passion point, and just strengthens it, to be honest, and it has done so far. So I've stuck with it for now, and I think with that interest comes a little bit of a natural ability to retain information and just sort of learn things quicker and hold on to those things a little bit better. So when you've got that natural interest, it just supports that, and you can become an expert that little bit easier, I suppose. Yeah.
Makes sense. So your passion for it makes it easier as well to learn and to engage with it. Yeah.
Yeah, so far, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, Benny, you said so you had sort of a placement with Bentley and then you're working at Aston Martin. I'm just interested to find out about how the different working for different companies, how they're different in terms of their culture, how they're set up differently or similarly. What did you find that you had to adjust, or what were the key contrasts between the two?
Sure. Bentley was obviously first, and I noticed, and I didn't notice it at the time, but looking back on it, being owned by VW Group and having that power of a sort of a parent company that overlooks with financial backing and R&D support was phenomenal for them. Coming into much more of a, I suppose, organic business, such as Aston, much smaller, lower volumes, doesn't have the power of a mother as a parent company. It's night and day in terms of the financial.
Do you find that you're more responsible?
Yes.
Were you just immediately more responsible?
Absolutely, yeah. There's much more shallow organization structure. I have reports directly into directors in this company, whereas I would have gone through several chains of command at Bentley. So that, yeah, from a selfish perspective, and a development point of view, it's really good because I've got exposure to the top tier people within the business, and you just learn things a lot quicker because everything's sort of right in front of you, whereas there's a lot of red tape and things at a bigger company such as Bentley. Not that it was not to discredit it in any way, but
yeah,
it's been an interesting
the bureaucracy of it all, just layers.
yeah.
Because I think Volkswagen, they own a number of different badges, don't they? So it's like, they're just trying to leverage their knowledge across different. Well, Aston Martin is you are
pretty much.
We are it.
Yeah.
I think it's as well a matter of dynamics, isn't it? In bigger companies, everything is more complex.
Yes.
So it creates a different dynamics, and it's a necessary dynamic, let's be honest, because of how complex it becomes to manage all the different brands and all the different people involved in the different products and so on.
Yeah.
But it's quite interesting what you said there about the difference in production volumes as well.
Yeah.
That kind of takes us nicely into my next question for you, which relates to that. Was kind of, if you could tell us a little bit, even if you want to compare them both, your experience at Bentley and now as Aston Martin, in terms of the day-to-day operations and the complexity of the supply chain relationships, if you've experienced any of that, and if you have any examples or stories that you would like to share with us.
Sure, yeah. I was lucky enough to spend, so the Bentley placement was through COVID, or the back end of COVID. And I was therefore, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, pulled into the factory for a month of my 12-month scheme. And that opened my eyes to that world, which I never probably would have even sort of experienced if that hadn't been. So experiencing that there on an initial basis, and coming to Aston and doing the same for a 2-week period, there's a lot of similarities. There's and considering they're both operating in the luxury automotive sector, it's probably expected. From a supply chain point of view, I'd again argue that they are very similar. However, Bentley, having mentioned that they've got VW Group, there's a lot of shared components that goes into their cars and a lot of carryover parts. So their supply chain is on a much larger scale because it feeds Porsche, Audi, many other brands, as well as Bentley, whereas Aston is fully independent. They have to source all of their products and components, or not privately, but they have to source them themselves and look after that independently. So
you mentioned that modular approach. Sorry, Mo. You mentioned that modular approach. It really highlights this concept that we mentioned to our students: design for manufacturing. So you're kind of having these parts that fit in several of the products. It makes it a lot more efficient if you have that standardization, and can also contribute to sustainability initiatives if you have that modular approach as well. So that's quite interesting that you've noticed that difference. Could you explain for our listeners what the luxury market looks like? What do you mean when you say that? What do you mean? What is the difference? Is it the way it's made? Is it the way that it is designed? So what is the thing that makes the luxury market so different?
Sure. So there's definitely an element of both of those things. So the design and build. So both Bentley and Aston Martin operate their manufacturing process predominantly by hand, through trained craftsmen and craftswomen. So there is, when you walk around the factory, it's just like nothing you'd really imagine. I think it's quite a wake-up call to understand just how many pairs of hands there are there, as opposed to what you would assume would be robots or machines. So anything from a painted chassis, which is all done by hand, and I think there's quite an interesting fact if you compare it to a Porsche 911. There'd be two of those fully built and out the door and on the road before an Aston Martin chassis has been actually painted. So just shows the level of time and effort that goes into that. All the stitching is hand done on the leather, and all the seats are configured by hand, and everything like that. So that time and effort and resource that goes into the production of those definitely supports that. But the luxury market as a whole, I would say, price point obviously comes in as a big factor. So you're looking at the top end of the price point for those. It's just the level of desire and demand. So that they operate usually demand driven. So there's usually a waiting list or a reserve list for these products. They're hard to get hold of, and you have to be of a certain caliber to be welcomed into that.
To be invited to buy the cars.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, this is I've watched way too many what's it called, Top Gear reviews. They have to invite you to buy the car.
Just to say one thing about operations and supply chains, because of what you've explained to us, that they keep doing it, and that kind of reminds me of what we try to explain to our students in terms of capacity management, the constraints that you experience, and also that you can adopt a level capacity approach, which is producing the same amount, even if there's not necessarily a buyer for it. But the thing is that we know that Aston Martin, everyone's going to want one. Like, the demand is high, so they're not going to have a problem selling it. No. So adopting that level capacity where you have some of them, you might end up for a period of time, some of them in stock, is not an issue for the company necessarily, because they're going to sell it. Like, if there's waiting lists, you're going to sell it. Like, it's not going to be an issue. But it's, as you said, you've explained it really well, where you've explained that you need to keep the supply chain going, the manufacturing keeps happening. So having that low amount of product produced, but a level capacity, so you produce the same amount or similar amounts in small volumes, means that your supply chain keeps going and you keep producing, and you have that inventory available for customers. I also liked how you explained how it's made, because it is because of that quality of a high-end product that people are willing to pay more for that type of product, because of not only the design and how it looks, but the process that you have explained. So the care that it's taken, even with the stitching by hand, is such a personalized production process, that it means that, of course, that differentiates you from everyone else in the market. It creates a different value proposition. So is there anything else that you would like to tell us about manufacturing or operations or supply chain relationships? Any funny stories that you might have experienced yourself? Or
I suppose not necessarily funny, but I will just dabble into what's happened for sort of some context of this year and the impacts of some of the external factors that we've faced this year, such the big one probably being the US tariffs. I mean, the US is a third of our market, a third of our business, essentially. So, I mean, it's just over, I think it's about 35% of our output goes to the US, and we had to totally stop trade for 3 months during that period of uncertainty, along with probably many of our competitors, you know, being in either Europe or UK based as well. Then it just blew everything out the water, and we, being a much smaller output in terms of volume compared to some of our competitors, such as Bentley, we have much smaller suppliers. So some of those are potentially reliant on us to keep going. In terms of their contracts are so big with us that, you know, because we can't necessarily approach the big suppliers because we can't necessarily meet the MOQs and things. So yeah, it's been a rocky one, really, because it's just those external factors. You can account for it being an amazing year, and you just can't. How do you navigate that? So it's been very interesting for me to sort of see that and observe how we do sort of navigate it. But there's some such as this really that you just can't account for. So.
And it impacted, as you say, the whole supply chain. So it's impacting in terms of the raw materials and how your suppliers are able to supply you or not. And also then the other end is you trying to sell the final product as well. So there's a full impact. And as you say, as a smaller company, that gives you a different supply chain relationship management, right?
Yep.
So when you think about managing relationships with suppliers, and even the power to negotiate in certain arenas becomes quite different from a very large multinational company. And I'm going to shut up now because Mo is hitching to talk about value proposition here. So go, Mo.
Well, I was gonna. So Ben, on the end of what you just said there, when you realized the tariff sort of came to effect, what you said you had to sort of stop production. Has your organization thought about how you can mitigate against that in the future? Was there some thinking behind how you can reflect that? Because that's probably a very unusual and, I would say, unexpected sort of jolt to the industry there.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't completely stopping production. It was just stopping sales to the US for a short period. But I think to mitigate that in the future, it is very difficult, but I suppose there could be an element of just sort of managing that base level, as we've touched on earlier, of production and just sort of seeing if we can come anywhere. You know, we'd obviously never want to drop below that, but you'd have to just you'd come down to that and work around.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a tricky one, to be honest.
It's quite difficult to create supply chain resilience. That's kind of what we're talking about here. That's quite a difficult thing when there's all these externalities that affect your ability to be resilient. So you can create certain redundancies. You can try to increase your flexibility in terms of volume, which you guys play with producing less or more volume. So, but it's quite difficult in these kind of situations where there's so much uncertainty. Sorry.
To Annabelle, actually, and to Ben, being in the luxury market, does that make you more sensitive to economic factors more than, I guess, a normal sort of regular mill company? What do you guys think?
I definitely think when you're a low volume manufacturer and you've got low volumes anyway, and you're dependent on reaching near, you know, the sort of the average output that you'd be expected of, then yes, and any sort of shake-up is going to impact you more than a mass volume manufacturer. If we stick in automotive, I think VW, if you look at Volkswagen as a manufacturer producing over 200 million cars a year, and you look at their whole global presence compared to us, where we're not in every market, we're not on every set of roads in the world, because of that exclusivity and the price point, and the number that are actually produced. So the shake-up's going to be felt a lot more, I think, by a luxury manufacturer that is producing less of something, compared to something that's much more present.
And I think it's also because of what you've mentioned there, that global presence gives them the ability to, as a whole, compensate sales from one to the other. So even that if there's a shake-up, because you have different customer segments, some segments might be more affected than others, but you then compensate overall, and that kind of allows you to recover a bit. But managing that portfolio of different brands. But I am going into a different field that is not mine. So I'll stick to my lane.
But sorry, guys. I would say the reverse may also be true, because you're a luxury manufacturer. I guess you can just charge whatever you like, and it is obviously Aston Martin is not a cheap brand.
No, it's a different customer segment for sure. Like.
Yeah. So I guess there's pros and cons to it, I guess. Yeah, in that sense. Sorry, Chris.
I mean, I've been far too quiet because it's so interesting to listen to you guys speak. But I mean, I've started writing up some questions, and one of them is related to how, because you've been in quite a lot of client-facing roles, if I understand, as a commercial graduate. So how I guess the brand image has to go around this personalization, but to what extent are there things that are standardized, and how is that interaction managed for the client to feel like they are being catered for?
Okay. I mean, I definitely think personalization is probably one of our strongest USPs, and you can essentially walk into a dealership and it's very widely spoken of that you can have pretty much whatever you want. And then we also have a subdivision called Q, which enhances that personalization even further, and you can, those sort of consistent components that are regulated and consistent across all models can then become customized as well. So for example, the gear selector, that's usually a common component across all models, but if you were to go down a further personalization route, you could personalize that. So it's a never say never world, I think, and that's promoted it's pushed on to the customer. But I think they're very much told that this is a unique experience. If you were to spec your car from new and go and configure it yourself, then it's already a bespoke journey. But it's again in the language that we portray to customers that it's, well, and it's true that no two Astons are ever going to be the same, even down to the fact that they're hand built. You're going to get variations, very slight variations in that, and because it's had a set of hands on it as opposed to a programmed robot. So that's how it's portrayed.
I'm just going to come in more, sorry, just to say, kind of aligns with this volume variety matrix we talked about in the module, where you have lower volume and higher variety, so you're sitting in that sense. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask Ben, has there been a customer that says, "Oh, I want this," and you just haven't been able to do that?
I remember back at Bentley, there was a customer that wanted a full bulletproof exterior.
Wow.
So it would mean reconfiguring all of the body panels, as well as
and where was this? In Bristol? I mean, what they do with a bulletproof?
Definitely not in this market.
It's a dangerous assignment.
Don't ask too many questions, Mo.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's the only one I've heard that couldn't have been done. And then I think there's an element of protecting the brand. So somebody wanted potentially some flames down the side, for example, sprayed on, and that would just hurt the brand image a little bit. So
Was that at Bentley or
no.
Aston?
that was both at Bentley, which I think the specs do go a little bit wild, more so there.
Right.
But one good example of proving that we can do anything was there was an Arabian princess, I think, that flew over with a particular nail varnish on, and we color matched. That was the nail varnish was color matched, and then the exterior bodywork was painted in that color. So
Wow.
That's really cool.
goes to show, yeah.
So is that
Amazing.
something that was already available as a paint, or did you have to kind of cater for her?
So yeah, that was a custom paint. It was a paint match. So I presume they would have got the color code from the nail varnish supplier, or potentially even just done it in house. But yeah, it was fully catered for that individual.
So do you see, do you see a difference in how you interacted with customers at Bentley and at Aston in that way?
I don't think so. No, I think they're very much in a similar sort of client basis. Their wants and needs are quite alike in that sense. I think just with, I suppose, just coming back to the volume element, you get some more wild requests from Bentley, perhaps because they're 3 times our volume in terms of output. So there's 3 times the amount of them on the road.
And because because of that aspect of personalization, are you really told that to tell customers that everything is possible right away?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, to my experience, it's as I said, it's a strong USP for us, because you couldn't get that if you dropped down a level into the premium market and you went to a high-end Mercedes-Benz dealership. You wouldn't get that level of customization. It would only go as far as what's on the palette that they offer. Porsche do an entry-level version of it where they can do paint to sample, but again, it's not as vast as what we can offer. So
I was just so good about industry analysis and supply and demand and all that sort of stuff. And I would like to talk about disruption of the industry. Clearly, over the past decade, electrification has been a big issue here. I believe Aston's going into that as well. Can you speak to how that is moving and changing the industry, and what do you see for the future in terms of car manufacturers in general?
It has been spoken of, and I think it's a touchy subject because of how artisan and handcrafted our cars are. It's difficult. It would be a very difficult move if we were to sort of invest heavily in robotics and machinery and technology to change how those cars were built. From a cost saving perspective, it would probably be very economical, but I think that would fully eliminate the messaging and the brand image, if I'm honest, and probably the same with Bentley, to be honest. So it's a very difficult one, but I think if you probably look at maybe back into the commercial remit, and come away from manufacturing for a sec, it's probably something that's needed. I think the advancements in AI to sort of speed up natural process or manual processes is definitely something that's being considered, and just sort of more automated reporting and things that are currently done very manually, and very time consuming, would help a lot.
Is the future of cars electric cars? Is that the future in your eyes? And that's from the inside.
I guess also, do clients ask for it?
Not in my world, no.
There you go.
I can't imagine an Aston that's got a battery in it, to be honest.
Really? Wow.
Are there none at the moment?
None. We have just released our first plug-in hybrid supercar, but that is more from a performance orientation as opposed to an economy and environmental perspective that we are seeing in other areas. But full battery electric vehicles are a long way off, if ever, for Aston Martin, I think. just because it's
Because it jives with your image, your branding, who you are. Yeah,
And
okay.
it's about
And
customer demand. If the
Yeah.
customers aren't asking for it, it's not a need. So you have to work with the market that you have at the. There's that element of creating novelty, and I'm passing the ball there to Mo and Chris with this one,
Yeah.
changing your business model in a way, but it's only worth it to develop that type of product or invest so heavily in R&D for that, if there's a market for it, and clearly that doesn't seem to be the case. I imagine that if customers start asking for it, it would be something that the company would look into, but otherwise it's not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a strategic move from our chairman. I think it was potentially back in around the end of 2023, early 2024, where we were looking to advance in battery electric vehicles and hybrids, but the strategy was reversed, and we were told, and we looked into it further, and there was as we've said, there wasn't a demand for it. So we've deferred that, and the release of the plug-in hybrid supercar that has just been that we're just starting to see on the ground in this last quarter is our first advancement into that. I would imagine there'll be something similar in years to come on our existing portfolio, but there isn't huge talk of fully diverging into those markets. Porsche, for example, have done a bit of a U-turn. They've heavily invested in fully electric vehicles and released quite a few, and still are, but their demand has dropped right off. They're seeing residual values being hurt quite considerably because the demand for existing ones isn't there either, and they're looking now to reinvest, go back into combustion engine because the demand is there further, more so.
It's a partnership, isn't it? So companies can have great intentions, but if the customers aren't buying the product, the company can't continue to develop it, because it's about business survival. You have to be sustainable. You have to have a sustainable business model in the long run. So if your customers aren't buying your product or that type of product, that doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
Self-driving, or at least systems where the driver is supported by. Is Aston Martin moving in that sort of direction in terms of technology advancements?
Definitely, yeah. Not quite self-driving. Again, I think the brand image is all around the driver and the enjoyment of driving. So I don't think there would ever be a world where we would have self-driving Astons, to be honest.
What's the point?
Okay. but I think there is. I do envision a scenario in which you're going to a bow tie dinner, just like James Bond, and you say to the car, "Park yourself" or something. Yeah, I feel like as a feature, and I'm just I know that the car manufacturing industry is moving, or at least trying to make advancements in vehicles where they sort of take over control to a different level of degrees, where they sort of keep an eye on the driver so they're not falling asleep and stuff like this, and they sort of support them. But do you feel in a decade's time that will be a realistic feature where a driver could just press the button and say, you know what, I don't want to drive for a couple of miles?
I mean, I think things are progressing so rapidly at the minute that I'm not going to say that it's not possible. I think anything's possible at this point in time. So, but where we are today, there's very much it's more around the safety of the driver and ensuring that there's limiting distractions, and if there are distractions, it's mitigating the risk of coming into another lane on a motorway, or clocking if the driver is falling asleep. We have got that technology within the cars currently, ensuring that the climate in the car is optimum for concentration, that sort of thing. So it's more safety features, I would say, at this point in time, rather than autonomy in the cabin.
And customer experience, I understand from what you're saying. So it's more about the experience you get in the car, the efficiency of the performance of the car. That's kind of more the focus, I guess, because of the typical customer, and the reason why you would buy an Aston Martin as well. So it is for the experience.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I have a question, Ben, around the how do you manage that the supply of the innovation, really? I mean, if you have that customer demand, customer-led products, obviously not everything can be done in-house, can it? Or is it, how is that managed at Aston Martin? Are there lots of networks and lots of partners?
So I know, well, if I pick on one example that I know about, in terms of the infotainment system. So historically, Astons have been slated for their infotainment systems being pretty poor. They've always been old generation Mercedes-Benz parts, which have never been well, they've never been totally satisfactory to the client, shall we say. But coming through and asking for more investment, it's something that we've definitely wanted to improve. So I think a lot of the investment has gone towards improving infotainment systems, and it has been all done in-house, using a foundation that I believe has been built in, but the development of it and the enhancements of it have definitely all been done in-house. But looking wider, I'm not entirely sure on how much is used as sort of base platforms and whether they are sort of bought in and developed. I think there is quite a lot of innovative behavior that we do that, because being a small volume manufacturer and no sort of parent company, as we've alluded to, it is difficult to start fully from scratch, and with resource constraints. So there has to be an element of, can we get hold of this part and then build it up and enhance it? So I think there's an innovative nature behind it as well, rather than solely relying on bought-in parts as such.
And if you compare that to Bentley, would you say that the attitude there was different?
I think yes, definitely different, as you've got heavily, I mean, VW and Audi as two sort of front runners as the two sort of parents of those companies, are just so wealthy to invest in the research and development and have the pull on everything to be able to deliver exactly what the customer wants. That can then get fed in and customized for a bespoke system in a Bentley or a Lamborghini. So instantly you have that ability to just pull, and something's almost pre-built. So from a resource or a supply network, it's much easier. However, on the back end of that, it does allow for customers to sort of complain around that and argue that you've just got that from an Audi or a VW, which is arguably a lot lower down the chain of comparison to the luxury segment. So lots of shared components do get picked up on, and it can come back to bite them. Whereas ours, we know, are, yes, they've been built off a platform that does come from somewhere else, but it's been developed enough to ensure that it's looks custom and feels customized, to fit an Aston Martin. So
it also speaks to the uniqueness of your competitive advantage. So if you do it more in-house, that specific adjustment and development, it means you're retaining the control over what would be your competitive advantage and the unique features of the product, which makes total sense. I wanted to see, Mo, do you want to explore a little bit more in terms of strategic approaches, the industry dynamics? You've asked already a few questions, but do you want to go more into that with Ben?
I think we, in the interview, we've covered, I would say, classic ideas of the industry dynamics. You know, Porter's 5 forces, you've not used that word, but you talked everything about it. Suppliers and, you know, and customers demanding, the industry, you guys are clearly in the high end of the market, which is a very different world to the low end of the market. Your customer base, and what struck me most was how everything you do is through the prism of your brand and your position within that particular industry. So every time I ask you, it's like, well, actually, this we won't do it. A customer of Aston Martin won't do it this way, or customers wouldn't want this. You know, what do you mean self-driving? What's that about? Like, it jars with. So everything's through the prism of what your, I would say, ideal customer is.
Yeah.
I think with all the stuff you said, you've spoken quite clearly about your value proposition and how you target that. I guess I wanted to perhaps ask you, are you guys sort of, as you were sort of are assimilated into Aston Martin, are you explicitly told this is the customer and everything we do is based around this? Are you guys sort of trained in that way, or is it just a cultural thing that you pick up?
It's difficult because I think historically an Aston Martin customer has been quite a typical character, perhaps middle-aged, retired, you know, earned their own wealth, that sort of thing. But in today's world, in the light of diversity and ensuring that we're meeting everyone's needs, I think we're also just looking to really push and entice new customers. So it's quite a dynamic task, if I'm honest. It's quite we're very much in a position now where we're looking to attract new clientele and modify that typical customer. We're definitely doing a lot of work to introduce women to the brand, and the younger generation as well, where Aston's historically been an older gentleman's car. So the introduction of new derivatives and new product lines that would attract female audiences and younger clients is definitely something that we're looking to pursue. So
I follow on that. There was the key controversy. Well, I would say a key direct rival, Jaguar. They went in a very different direction to you guys. What's your feeling at Aston Martin about what they did?
It was very bold. I don't know if, I mean, they've been super brash with their marketing and their direction. They're going fully electric and they're jumping on that with both hands. So it will be a time will tell case, I think. I don't know if they've perhaps shouted about it a little early and we haven't seen anything now for quite a while since that big release. But it'd be an interesting one. I think they're going to operate naturally in a different sector to us now, and probably have done historically anyway, to be honest, with them being slightly just below luxury in the high-end premium market. So just for context, for those who don't know, Jaguar, was it a year or two ago now, they totally rebranded themselves to a whole different model local car, you know, advertised clearly to a whole new demographic, almost cancelling their, I would say, typical customer. And I think many would see Jaguar to be a relatively cheaper alternative to Aston Martin, but a Jaguar trying to be an Aston Martin, I would say. And it was exemplified in the movie where there was a Jaguar and a Aston Martin race and stuff like this. So when Jaguar did that, I thought, goodness, that's bold. Like as a Jaguar customer, I'd feel clearly alienated. But they, I guess, you know, they pressed the red button, didn't they? So that was it's a huge thing. So Aston Martin's not planning to do that, as far as you're aware. Not to my understanding, no.
Absolutely. I think what's really interesting is you have this dual perspective of two brands and two cultures and two companies, which is so fascinating to see and to identify those differences. And both brands and both USPs are focused so much on innovation and personalization. I would assume that a lot is done really well to innovate. However, you know, do you see any kind of obstacles in any of those processes, maybe in the leadership, maybe in how you as a employee, as a graduate, have been integrated in those conversations?
I think the resource constraints plays quite a big part. I think, as we've mentioned a little bit with Bentley, the power of financial backing and the R&D that's perhaps already been done and is there as a foundation to be built on is a huge advantage. If you look at Aston, yes, they have got millions of pounds being poured in investment, and there are a lot of people looking to back the company. However, that's got to cover everything from the ground up. So I think there's one barrier in the sense that you just, from a resource constraint perspective, it just isn't possible to fully invest and absolutely commit to something in terms of an innovative process and configure something from the ground up if you are starting from scratch, or even if you're, like we've said, buying things in and configuring them in-house and innovating on them in-house. Yeah, it's that immediately just shouts out to me as something that's going to be a big barrier unless you've got that ability to just pour the resource into for one. Yeah.
Aston is such a traditional manufacturer in the sense, so based on what you're saying about selecting the suppliers and so on, I'm thinking, if you have any experience of or understand, what are the relationships like? Are these long-term partnerships because it's such a specific traditional product, or is it more, of course it's going to depend on the product category, like whatever they're supplying and receiving in terms of the raw materials, but I imagine there's quite a few suppliers where you've established really long-term collaborative relationships to be able to maintain that traditional approach. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, definitely. The example that springs to mind is the sourcing of our leather for the upholstery and the chairs, the seats in the cars. So Bridge of Weir, they come from up in Scotland.
Wow.
So that's a fully, I mean, they only provide, A-star grade leather, and it's with minimal defects or next to no defects. It has to pass a certain inspection process. So yeah, that's been a very long-standing relationship, and they know exactly what we want, and we expect nothing less from them.
That's perfect.
So, yeah.
And it also means that through those closer relationships, it also opens up for possibilities of innovation. So if you're collaborating and you know each other so well, it means that there's an opening for that further innovation coming through the supply chain as well.
Yeah, and that has actually happened naturally. I think so. The way the hides come to us are shaped specifically to improve our production process. So we have a I'm going to allude to a machine here. I know I've been speaking a lot about hands on building our cars, but there is a machine that cuts the leather just to improve that lean manufacturing element and eliminate any wastage. So so we've obviously been in communication with this provider, and we've asked specifically, the size and the shape of the hide. Can we have it in this format? Which isn't always easy because cows come in different shapes and sizes, obviously, but to a certain extent. But that's just like that small step is an improvement in timing from getting the hides pushed through quicker, and they can just come in and they're ready to go and be put on this machine to be shaped and cut into the correct sizes. So that's already
marginal little gains all the time here, there, all that all makes a difference.
Exactly. And you've mentioned lean management. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that? So 2 questions to follow up. Sorry, I want to hear about lean because you mentioned how it helps speed up production with that machine and things like that. And I want to just finalize the suppliers conversation. So would that mean you think that they have less amount of suppliers but closer relationships with their suppliers as a whole?
Well, if I go with the lean manufacturing question first, so that's heavily encouraged in our world, particularly from a manufacturing process, and it's just I keep alluding to it, but it is from ensuring that we're capitalizing on everything and eliminating any waste and making the most out of everything, to just ensure that everything coming through the door is absolutely maximized. So I think we've got very stringent processes throughout the whole build process. We use a software called Flags, which is the same one that's used by Bentley as well. It's like it's a project management software, I think, or something of the sort, but or a specific to manufacturing. So every single step is input into the software, and the build can't go on unless that has been approved and signed off. So that sort of thing, and then to improve that, there's sort of live dashboards at the end of every intersection between every section within the build process. So those are constantly being fed by any errors that are flagged up, or any missing parts that aren't delivered on time, or that sort of thing. So they're constantly, and then they're reviewed every week to just improve that build process, I suppose, and ensure that targets are being met every single day and the number of output is correct. So yeah,
that makes sense, but also allows you to do, as you're alluding to, the quality control checks throughout to see what errors and avoid them as well. So preventing those errors kind of thing. And I was thinking, it means, because it's more of a manual process, even though technology is used to assist speed and so on, it's still a very manual intensive process. So that means it's going to take longer to finish producing the car, which adds its own complexities and costs to it. I was remembering one of the videos that we show to our students that talks about manufacturing at Nissan and doing the Mini Cooper. And the turnaround for every 60 seconds Nissan gets a car out of that manufacturing plant. It's a very different turnaround to what you would have at Aston Martin, because it's such a manually intensive process, that even if it is assisted by technology in terms of process efficiency, to make sure you don't have mistakes, to control the quality, to make sure that it's cut at a certain level, like the leather and so on, it still means that you cannot get a car out of production every 60 seconds, that's for sure. So it takes longer to manufacture as well, which adds costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there was a second part, your question around the relationships of suppliers, was it?
Yes.
So yeah, I think with us being a lower volume manufacturer, it does naturally come with sort of a smaller basis of suppliers, although you'd be, you'd be mind boggled about how many components go into an Aston. So, and I can't unfortunately remember the number, but it is,
It's top secret.
Big number.
It's top secret.
But naturally, with us being low volume, I think we tend to attract or naturally gravitate towards smaller suppliers. And therefore that naturally helps with better relationships, and you can have direct input into the sort of senior members of those businesses as well. So I think we have close-knit relationships, yes, and we don't necessarily have massive relationships with some of the big top suppliers that perhaps would provide things to Bentley and other competitors, and I think that's just purely on a business scale basis rather than and the size of the business. But I think small business to small business naturally enhances those relationship building abilities.
And I would imagine quite regional supply chains as well. So UK based mostly, I would think.
You'd like to think,
or a mix.
I think, yeah. I think we definitely try everything we can to, yes, but certain components that just sort of go a little bit off the radar, perhaps sort of just smaller components, definitely we do shop around for. But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, the engines, for example, are all built in the UK, and everything like that. So yeah, the large main components we have quite strong labeling for that. Yeah. So
what I'm really curious about is the extent to which your strengths and your qualities are actually integrated and in those decision-making processes. And I alluded to that earlier, in the extent to which how do you feel engaged with the extent to which things are done and decisions are made and changes are made. And you mentioned that you feel valued in that way. Do you have any examples of things where, like, little kind of mini success stories of things you've done that or your voice has been heard?
Yeah. So I mean, very recently I've been essentially mirroring the role of the events planner in the UK marketing team. So I mean, very, very different world to the manufacturing talk that we've been having, and the supply chain talks that we've been having previously. But essentially, I've been handed a very, very brief or vague template on what the event should consist of, and then just been asked to go and plan it and run it, essentially, which as a graduate in a large corporation,
they threw you in the deep end.
Yeah. And these were actually paying customer events as well. So these were experiences that it was the first series that we've launched of this. So it was a paid customer experience where we went live on a website and customers would sign up and register their interest and book on and pay to come to this experience. So we did track days as well as driving convoy elements between the factory down in Gaydon to Silverstone to the F1 facility, that sort of thing. And then sort of full immersion days at Gaydon in the factory as well. So 3 pretty big, expensive experiences that I was asked of. Everything from sourcing catering suppliers and then organising routes, getting the staffing on board, briefing the staff on the responsibilities for the day, etc. was all handed to me, as well as making sure that it ran with a profit. So
it's really
Amazing.
good that you're having a chance to showcase your skills.
yeah.
Nothing that would surprise us though, but as you are very memorable students. So with that said, we would like to ask you about your student experience. What was your most memorable experience at UWE? Because we remember you, so memorable for us for sure. But what was memorable for you at UWE?
I mean, it's probably quite a boring example, but I did actually really enjoy my dissertation on the enterprise project. I'm very keen to one day sort of set up my own, probably just like a small business, and see where it goes. I've had sort of previous examples of this since leaving uni and things, and that was a real stepping stone into that world of something, blank piece of paper. What can you think up of and deliver? And I managed to source prototypes for it and do all the costings for it and ensure that it would turn a profit, that sort of thing. So I think that was I think it was the real worldness of it. I think that's not a real world, but a real world. But just living
how much it was similar to the outside world.
Yes,
practicality though.
And there was arguably quite a lot of the modules that we did and the case studies that you refer to, and you can actually see that in the real world. It's just it sticks more, I think. So that was probably most memorable.
You obviously did a sandwich year as well, which probably connected everything you learned to the reality of the world. I don't think we can. The question of how much has the sandwich year helped you in the current job, I think is going to take us in a lot of depth, because I assume there's quite a lot. But what would you say is one of the most important things that this brought to you, that sandwich year?
I think, well, firstly, from a fundamentals point of view, it's just understanding how the workplace actually works, because it was my first. I was again very much thrown in at the deep end in a large global corporation and living, working the hours, the expectations. You're being paid to be there. You've got to deliver a certain expectation. Everything just from the ground up of how to behave in a job, essentially. So that was very important. But I think also just understanding what you're good at is quite, you start to look at where your skills lie and what things you're good at. It's a very good learning curve to set you up for, because it's not a permanent position. It's only 12 months, so it's your opportunity to jump right in and explore as much as you can. I was fortunate enough to be in quite a pivotal role in terms of a lot of departments were feeding in to the one I was in. I was in a launch planning position, so it was essentially how do we look at the next 10 years and understand how we can launch the cars. So I had all of engineering feeding in, saying when things are going to be ready. All of the marketing teams understanding when were the right times to launch cars, the sales teams to ensure that the volumes were correct for that, and everything could roll out smoothly. So you'd sort of learn to unpick what things work. And even if you don't get fortunate to be in that position where you've got a lot of things feeding in, it's an opportunity. You can play that undergrad card a little bit and play the naive card and just say, I want to learn. Can you spend 15 minutes with me, and I want to understand what you do. So it's set me up very nicely, and I definitely wouldn't do it any other way, to be honest.
That kind of takes us to the next question, which is what advice would you have for other students? Would it be about having a placement, having a sandwich year? Would it be about study techniques? What kind of hacks would you give other students?
I think the sandwich year I can't recommend enough, to be honest. I get that it's possibly not for everybody, and people have different viewpoints for sure, but I think as a nice, even if you just see it as a nice introduction to the working world, like arguably I've had another year off between finishing uni and starting in the job, so perhaps not the best example, but it certainly just sets you up, and you have that level of expectation then to know what to somewhat expect when you do start in a full-time role. And it just obviously, like Chris said, it just enhances everything that you've learned and brings to life things that you've learned, and perhaps not even notably, it's very much possibly a subconscious thing, but you will definitely just naturally gravitate towards things and do things in certain ways because of your learnings. So it's just a nice way of solidifying your learning, I suppose. So yeah, I suppose study techniques, I was one that required separate spaces, ensuring that I had separate spacing from your home life and your working life. And also the sandwich year enhances that more so because you're going into a workplace every day. So in my final year, it was religion for me to sort of go, away from the flat or the house for the day to study and get things done.
All right, Ben, I think we're gonna wrap up. I think I feel like we could have delved into so much more stuff as well, but
I think Chris has a pending question there.
I have so many.
He's always got pending questions. Go on, Chris.
I have so
many.
Go
on, Chris.
But you said this was the final question, so I can.
No. The final question for the podcast, but you can ask whatever you want.
Fair enough. Because
you're creating a lot of editing for me now. Thanks, bro. Carry on.
The question I had in mind was because I remember you were part of a group as well of friends, right? And I remember the energy that was driven from that as well. That was kind of extremely positive. Can you just kind of talk about this? To what extent was that helpful to your studying and to your success?
Yeah, I mean, it's fundamental to create a nice little bubble, and whether it's lucky enough to be course mates or if it's the people you live with, they're all still my friends today. We still see each other, and yeah, there'll probably be people that I will see long into the future. So I think it's fundamental, and I was fortunate enough to have those close-knit friends on my course as well, and you can just fully lean on each other for support and bounce ideas off each other, and the projects we were involved in together naturally become that bit easier because you're with people that think alike and have similar interests, and you're all sort of striving for the same goal. So yeah, it's definitely something to try and obtain. But even if it's not, people that are directly on your course, it doesn't doesn't matter so much. It's people that you can, you know, go back to your accommodation with, or to your student house or whatever it is, and just have that network to, you know, they could be from a completely different learning point of view. They could be on a completely different course, but that you realize that actually you know, you can open up your eyes to other areas and how that can feed in to your learning. I mean, my girlfriend's did psychology, so I've learned quite a considerable amount about psychology theories and stuff, and she studied at UWE, and now how I can see how those pathways lead into business techniques and the world of business, because it is people essentially, business. So yeah,
getting back to that, it's a social science. It's probably the most social science there is.
Speaking my language, I did psychology as a first degree, so, and then
there you go,
supply chain, so there you go. Is there anything else that anyone wants to ask? Ben, do you want to ask us any question?
Good question.
Well, I'll go last if there's anything else. Chris, I didn't know if you had anything else. Or
I mean, we could go on and on, so let's leave it at that.
Let's stop him.
Stop me?
I suppose the only question I had is of a recent venture that I'm looking to pursue outside the world of Aston Martin. Is this still on record? I don't know. Or are we?
Oh, we'll remove it. Don't worry.
Do you want me to remove it?
I mean, it's not. It wouldn't be for the podcast. So yeah, I mean.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Well, Annabella, can you just say a little thank you, or whatever? Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Thank you very much for your time today, Ben. It was lovely speaking to you, and we can really see you shine in your new adventure at Aston Martin, as we expected. It's lovely to see that they can experience the skills that you have in the same way that we've seen them grow at your time at UWE. So thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today.
No problem. Thank you very much. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Ben.
Chris, what do you think of it? How was the interview?
I would say it was refreshing to see Ben again. I mean, he's such a clever, intelligent guy, and he has so much experience in the automotive industry. It was a lesson about the whole industry and how it operates. On the side of innovation, it's really interesting to see how both of those businesses are very customer-led and focused on personalization, and how that impacts the whole rest of the business.
I think Ben is one of those sort of unassuming people where he's very quiet about it. He's very methodical. Clearly, he works really, really hard to get where he's at, and he's done a great job at it.